Hi, everybody. Today I'm talking to someone who's an experienced marketer and also a growth hacker. He's actually the person who coined the term growth hacking back in 2010. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. So not only that, but he was also responsible for growth at some of the biggest brands and tech companies in the world, such as Dropbox, Eventbrite, Lookout, and LogMeIn. He's also the founder and CEO of growthhackers.com and the co-author of the book called Hacking Growth. So Sean Ellis is a very smart guy, and I believe you will hear in this episode some awesome ideas and tactics that can help you scale your business. So without further introduction, I want to say welcome, Sean, and thank you for accepting this invitation to be part of my podcast.
Thanks, Robert. It's great to be on with you.
So since you coined this term, everyone has been talking about growth hacking, and I read about this topic on almost every single blog post or tweet I see. People still discuss the same successful growth hack that big brands use. But today, I want to clarify maybe for myself, but I also want to clarify for everybody that is listening to this podcast. And I like to hear from you. What does growth hacking mean to you? And I know that you heard this question a lot, but maybe you can clarify me.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I do hear it a lot, but I think it's important to clarify it. So for me, growth hacking is really about using the same scientific process that's been around for hundreds of years. So having some analysis where you figure out ways to drive improvement and then coming up with ideas, running tests, having hopefully a good way of prioritizing those tests, running tests, and ultimately figuring out how to move a metric. So normally the scientific process would be used for innovation. This is really applying it to moving a metric, which ideally is your Northstar metric. And then probably, that also describes marketing pretty well. So probably the biggest difference between marketing and growth hacking is that you're not just doing this with channels and kind of top of funnel stuff, but you're actually doing this across all touch points in the product. So it requires usually a cross-functional effort between a marketing team, a product team, engineering, design, really everything that's about driving improvement in how you grow the business.
So I really love that you step up with the marketing word, and that's why I want to ask you, because I'm also a marketer and most of my community is formed by marketers as well. So I would like to ask you, what does like a growth hacker and a digital marketer have in common? Like, does one of the other need some extra skill, superpower, or is it just curiosity enough?
Yeah, so I started as a marketer, and I still think of myself as a marketer. So, to me, the challenge that I had as a marketer was that, in particular, when I was trying to grow LogMeIn, I tested a lot of channels. I tried to grow those channels, but I was really constrained on what I could grow because our first user experience in the product was just not very good. It was really hard to get started with LogMeIn initially. So 95% of the people who signed up never once used the product. And so that's where I really discovered that to effectively grow that business, I actually had to work with the product team to experiment on that new customer onboarding. And, I potentially, even if I had the skills on the marketing side, so even if I could do the engineering around different types of installers and different ways to get started inside the product, I don't think the product team would have trusted a marketer or a group of marketers to go in and do that. So that's where, sometimes you can have people who have all of the skills, but they also have to have the permission to run the experiments in kind of the deeper parts of the product.
That's very interesting, because I believe that today there are more and more startups and SaaS products that are using this strategy, and they are hiring growth hackers, that they are something like the bridge between the marketing department and also the product department, right?
I think it can be, or you can have essentially, you can avoid having the bridge if those two teams can already work together really well. So, I think there's lots of different ways to slice it. And that's why I don't necessarily recommend companies have a growth hacker on the team. I don't necessarily recommend companies have a growth team, but what I do recommend is that they run lots of testing and that they have a shared metric across the company, and that ideally that testing, they have permission to run that testing anywhere that could affect the key metric in the business, what we call a Northstar metric.
Okay, I will get to the Northstar metric too, because I already heard that you mentioned it 2 times. But before that, can you like go back when you come up with the term growth hacking? When and how was your tipping point when you get to this idea?
So the main thing was when I was at Dropbox was when I started realizing that I'll go backwards a little bit.
Okay.
So I spent 10 years in 2 companies where I was the vice president of marketing, and both of those companies listed on NASDAQ, and I ran marketing through the pre-NASDAQ days up until filing for the NASDAQ listing. And I realized at those companies that the kind of first 6 months of go-to-market was probably the most important, was the area where I added the most value. And so after I left LogMeIn, I worked with a number of companies just for the upfront 6-month period. And so the second of those companies was Dropbox. And what I realized, so a lot of that was to get equity in the business. So I got paid some cash, but a lot of it was just ownership in the business. And so it was really important for me that when I left after those 6 months, that it didn't just, that all my work didn't just get undone. And so it was really important for me to think about how do they continue to manage this growth hacking process after I leave. And so originally I started to try to help them hire a marketer to replace me. But what I found is that most people who were applying for those positions were really, it's like they built their resume by reading the book Marketing 101, kind of a college textbook around branding and awareness building and kind of all these pieces that, in my opinion, a relatively early stage startup doesn't have usually the funds and kind of can't really prioritize those things. What the right person needs to really focus on: how do we profitably acquire new customers who get a great experience in the product? And if you do that enough times, you build a good brand and you build good awareness, but you do it in a more sustainable way. And so that's where I found that if I just promoted for a head of marketing, I had a very different profile of person applying. And so that's when I started to think, okay, if we call it something else, maybe I can redefine what that role should be. And that was the impetus for saying we're looking for a growth hacker.
And did you find it?
No, actually. So that was the kind of interesting thing at Dropbox, was that I did not find it, because I kind of, it took a little while for the word to kick in. And so I was already gone for probably almost a year by the time that the word growth hacking started to be popularized. So I left in early 2009 and then, didn't coin the term until 2010. But it was sort of the need for the term that came to me when I was at Dropbox. And so actually it was another 9 months after I left Dropbox before the next marketer joined the team. And but the really cool thing was that we built the right culture. And that's why I said you don't necessarily need a growth hacker if you're running a high velocity of tests. So we built the right culture and systems and processes at Dropbox to where after I left, it was I think it was all engineers on the team, and they continued to run a high velocity of testing across all of the key customer touch points. And so they were really, with a team without a marketer at all, they were able to continue the testing program that helped them stay on track to become the fastest SaaS business to reach $1 billion in annual revenue. And I think a lot of that is just because they, essentially, engineers tend to be very creative problem solvers. And so once they learned the power of testing, and they tend to be very math driven. So once they learned the power of testing, they were able to keep that process going.
Exactly. But like, my next question, it's about the customers. And when you're like a new company, And we all know that today acquiring the first 10 customers can be like an easy target to achieve when you start like a new company. But
Mm-hmm.
but let's talk a little bit about churn. What are some of your favorite tactics to get customers not only to stay but also become ambassadors for your brand? Like, can you use growth hacking tactics to make those customers become the ambassador for your brand, for your product?
Well, I think it really comes down to no one's going to be an ambassador for your product unless they really find your product valuable, right? They're not going to go and tell other people that they should use it if they already don't think it's a must-have product themselves. So I think that's the starting point, is figuring out, does anyone look at your product and say, after they've tried it, say, oh my gosh, I can't live without this product. And so that's really the starting point. And then once they consider it a must-have, then there's a number of things that you can do to help drive that ambassador. So I actually had a great interview on a podcast I recently launched. I released this podcast yesterday with the head of growth at TransferWise, and he's essentially built that business from 40 employees to 1,700 employees, primarily off of customer ambassadors. And what he said is not just the product that drives it, but it's really all of these users who believe in the cause. So it's kind of this cause-based marketing approach where they believe that most people are getting screwed over by their banks when they're doing international money transfers, and so it's essentially they want to get the word out that there's a much more affordable, elegant way to transfer money internationally. And so it has to deliver on that. It needs to be more affordable and very easy to use and just excellent customer service and all of that. And then people want to get on board what the overall mission of the company is to make it much easier and affordable to move money around internationally. And so I think that's an example of what drives that powerful word of mouth. But it all starts with finding not just your first 10 customers, but your first 10 customers who say that they can't live without the product, and then figuring out how you engage with them beyond that point.
Hmm. That's very interesting, and I love the fact that you pointed out that not really they have to be like the ambassadors, but you have to find that point, that hot topic in their life, to be a part of their life, to be a part of their day by day living. By creating a product, they have to use it so they can live without that product.
Exactly, and I think the challenge there is that that's the hardest part right there, is creating a product that people can't live without. And there's almost no right way to do that. I think as marketers and growth people, what our goal is to take the product that we're given and help find the market that can't live without that. And so the way I do that is, I might throw 1,000 people at a product, and then it's about sorting through those people to find the 10 who can't live without it, and really understanding those people on a deep level. What were they using before? Why do they love this product? Why would they be very disappointed without this product? What would they use instead if this product weren't available? Just learning everything about how they use the product and why it's important to them, and then using that information to go out and acquire the next 1,000 or 10,000 people.
I believe that Seth Godin said that will you be missed if you will be if you won't still have your product or your brand, something like this. I can't remember the quote, but
I haven't heard him saying that, but I do think that's the absolute basic premise of building a sustainable business, is that you have to be a must-have product.
I don't know if you know, I'm working for Banner Snack, and Banner Snack, it's an online graphic design tool. So, and lately we launched a few new features that can help our customers do their work better. One of the features is a banner generator. It's a visual generator. You start from one design, and then you can, create from one design multiple sizes. And many of our users told us that this is like a dream come true for them. We save them a lot of time, not only creating a new design, but also saving their time to create better design by giving them the chance from 2 or 3 clicks, they can create multiple sizes from only one type of design. So I believe this can be like a good example on how you can be a good part and how you can save your customer, I don't know, maybe their time, their money, or just giving them a cause that you said on your example.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's, I think you have a theory in the beginning when you build the product, but it's not until you find that one person who can't live without it, and then hopefully the 10 and then the 1,000 that you have something, not only that you can retain people and reduce that churn, but then you can hopefully mobilize those people to be a really powerful engine of growth for the business.
Yes. Because you mentioned several times North Star metric, can you also define what's the North Star metric and how you see this concept integrated in a growth strategy?
Yep. So, yeah, I'm going to take one step backwards even before explaining what the North Star metric is and explain why it's important. And so, essentially, as I mentioned, the challenge that growth hacking is all about using this scientific process to grow the business. The challenge is that usually one person, a growth hacker, might get really excited about this process and read in a book and learn about, wow, this would be great. Then they bring it back to their company, and the company's not used to working that way, and then that person gets really frustrated and just is not able to really execute that. And maybe they're able to execute it with marketing channels, and then that's really just good marketing. That's the way any digital marketer should be working today. But to be really effective, you need to apply that scientific process around not just acquisition, but how you activate new customers, how you retain and engage new customers, how you drive referral. All of those should be done through a test and learn process. And so that's where the North Star metric comes in, is that when you can come up with a metric that reflects really progress against your mission and ideally reflects the amount of value you're delivering to your customers, that must have value we just talked about, then and when you're growing that footprint of value, that is how you create a big sustainable business. And so it's a little bit confusing just in describing it that way. So usually I find with examples it works best. So Uber has a really good one, which is just weekly rides. So every week they count the number of rides through the Uber platform, and they know that every time there's a ride in an Uber, drivers get some value and riders get some value. And so if they compare this week's weekly rides to last week's weekly rides, they can see that they're making more and more impact against customers by providing their solution to those customers. Airbnb is similar, where it would be nights booked. So again, for hosts and guests, every time there's nights booked on the platform, there's value on both sides of the marketplace. For non-marketplace businesses like Facebook and Slack, they're focusing all their efforts to grow the number of daily active users, because they know when there's more daily active users on Facebook, there's more people reading posts, there's more people making posts. The same thing on Slack, more people reading messages and writing messages, and just essentially driving engagement on those platforms. And so but when you start to think about driving the number of rides on Uber or the number of active monthly or weekly users on a platform, that's not just marketing's job. That's the product team's job. That's the design team's job. That's engineering is doing that. So really, when you pick the right number, it's something that everyone in the company plays a role in moving that number. And so that's really the power of a North Star metric, is that it's reflecting both impact and value to customers, but it's also something that all of the teams in the business are working together to move that number.
You also write in your article, because I've done some research, and your article back in 2018 does a North Star metric over simplified growth. and you simply said that you define Northstar metric as the single best metric for tracking accumulated user value for a product over a time period. But
yes,
I really want to dig a little bit deeper in how can you find your North Star metric? Like, is there any strategy? Are there any steps? And as a founder, as a marketer, as an entrepreneur, if you have a SaaS product and you're a marketer for that SaaS product, how can you find your North Star metric?
Yeah, so there's really two key inputs that I look for. One is just the value proposition of the product. So what is the value that someone gets from the product, and really trying to document that. So kind of what we talked about before, if someone says they'd be very disappointed if they couldn't use the product anymore, why would they be very disappointed? What is the value that they're getting that would make them disappointed? And then the other side is really the mission of the business. So if you ask, why do we even exist? What impact are we trying to make on customers? What problem are we solving? If you have both of those, sometimes it's the same. I'll give you an example of a company. I was in a workshop recently in Paris where one of the companies in the workshop, they actually are they don't have the exact same answer to those two things. So it was a little bit confusing. So they have, their mission was to reduce food waste, and their product is essentially that the value proposition of their product is essentially they take produce that's about to expire, and they make it really affordable for people who may not have as much money but want to be able to eat fresh produce. And so the value proposition for those people is really just affordable fruits and vegetables, but their mission is to reduce the waste of vegetables. So for them, the North Star metric is probably something along the lines of the amount of fruits and vegetables that they save from going into the garbage. And so that's like every week, how many kilograms of fruits and vegetables are they saving that would have otherwise been thrown away. So that's the one time where it might be a little bit different. But for an Uber, maybe their mission is to make it easier for people to get where they want to get, and and then and then the benefit that people get, it's really convenient for the rider, and for the driver, its ability to make money. And so that's where they're able to hone in on the weekly rides as their number. So it's really trying to figure out what is the value, and ideally the more that you can express that in terms of something that relates to the mission, it brings meaning to the broader team when they're so you could say, so the previous interview I did on my Breakout Growth podcast was with a company called Acorns. And so Acorns, their mission is about helping millennials become investors and save their money. And so they could just say, active users on the platform, but by just changing the word slightly to active investors, that makes it, more tied to the mission and brings more meaning for the rest of the team in trying to grow that number. Does that make sense?
Yep. So it's something like get back to your basics, get back to your foundation, look at what do you want with your company and where do you want to get with your company, and then you just create a strategy to create like a process that can make your company and your startup like a bigger one, right?
Yeah. And again, I think that the challenge is that what you would normally see is, a marketing team would come up with their number, and it might be new customers. And then a product team might be, customer retention rate might be what they're focused on. And so the problem is with that is that, new customers might actually reduce the retention rate, but they could be like profitable new customers. And so then it creates conflict between those two departments. But if instead we said active customers on the platform is what both care about, and that maybe the product team is more focused on, we can drive active customers by retaining customers and doing a better job activating new customers. And then the marketing team is about how do we get do we acquire customers, but not just acquire them, acquire customers who are actually going to stick around on the platform, do it in a profitable way. So there's other metrics that matter beyond the Northstar metric, but it's that the right Northstar metric gets everyone in the company working together and focused on growing that metric and doing it from what they personally can control.
I love it. I love it. And now that we talked about the past, and now that we talked about the present and the strategies, I want to challenge you and talk about the future. Where do you see that is the future for growth hacking?
Well, the truth is, it's interesting. What I can tell you is that everything that we've covered so far sounds so logical and simple, but what I have been really surprised by is that most companies fail when they try to do it. So today, the truth is that very few companies are working cross-functionally to grow a Northstar metric and doing that through rapid experimentation. And so what happens is companies have been working together in their little silo, they've been siloed by functional silos, especially as the companies grow. And it's been that way for decades or hundreds of years potentially. So even if it's a new company, people's experiences in companies that are very siloed. And so what I would say is hopefully the future is what I'm talking about, because the present is not that. For most companies, the present is a marketing team tends to be pretty data driven and testing, but they're very constrained because the rest of the company is not testing effectively, or they're just, it's not coordinated very well. So I think that's the first point. Before we get too far around how does AI get into there and how do you run better experiments and get better results, it's most people are not doing this at all. And hopefully the future is that everyone starts doing this. And then once they're doing this, that's when I think you can start to have things like AI, where you're doing some automatic testing and just getting smarter and smarter about how to segment different users down to a level where you understand their needs on a much more unique basis, and you start to have much more customized experiences across your platform based on understanding a variety of needs, and then you can start to support. You can take each person and maximize the value that they get out of the platform by using technology to really personalize experiences. But that's so far away from just the basics of getting teams to work cross-functionally together to figure out how to effectively drive valuable customers and retain those customers, that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's it going to be like in 20 or 30 years, because I see how hard it is for people to just do what seems to me to be so obvious today.
But you're only at the beginning. You have 9 years since you started the growth hacking and you coined that term, right? So yeah. I believe that there's a big challenge in making all of these new companies that are coming around to understand that growth hacking, it's a natural thing they have to do in their company and in their strategy.
Yeah, and unfortunately, new companies are the ones who seem to be okay. They don't have as much to forget, So the challenge with new companies are that a lot of them don't even get to product market fit, so they don't figure out how to create something that people actually really want. But once they have product market fit and they create that must-have product experience, they're not too hard to get to adopt this approach. So I would say 95% of the companies that are doing growth hacking well are companies that were founded in the last 10 years. It's all those other companies that are losing ground to these new upstarts, which is exciting. If you're a startup, it suddenly means that you have a lot more potential to beat these incumbent players. But to me, I would like to see really every business that has something that's very valuable for their customers to be able to figure out how to get more customers who get more value from those products. And so that's where I spend most of my time is companies that maybe already have 50 or 100 or 200 employees, but they're not approaching growth in a very effective way. And so I think by the time they get to 10,000 employees, they're almost beyond help. but there is, I think some of the companies that aren't too huge that still have good potential to adopt these approaches and to be much more successful.
Awesome. So Sean, before we finish this interview, I have a quick challenge for you. And I wanted to ask my listeners a question that can challenge their marketing strategy. And my audience, as I said, is formed by people working in the marketing and communication industry. And even if they won't be able to answer it, because we all know podcasts, and maybe they can, I don't know, reply a tweet, or maybe they can comment to the blog post, or maybe they can just, I don't know, send you the answers. I'm pretty sure it can help them reflect on it. So they can do like a better job at the company they work. So what's your question? And what I really want to do, and maybe like create a challenge also for you, but also for the people that will go to the How to Web conference in Bucharest, because I know you will speak there in 31 October. So this question maybe can be like an icebreaker for them to come and to talk with you at the conference.
Perfect. No, that sounds good. So one question back to you for listeners, is it what would you say the average company size is for your listeners?
Let's say, I don't know, maximum 100 people.
Okay. And minimum?
Minimum 25.
Okay. So if they have at least 25, then they probably have product market fit. So we'll skip over that. Then my question for them would be, I'm actually going to give 4 questions.
Okay,
I know
great.
That makes it harder, but 1, what is your Northstar metric? So that's the first thing they should figure out. And then 2, they should diagram what are the parts of the business that move that metric and how they move it. So across acquisition, what are the channels that they're getting new users from? Activation, what's the very first thing that someone does where they get value from the product? Retention and engagement, what is it that keeps people coming back and using that product more often? Referral, how do people bring in additional people? Is there some natural product usage, or is it just word of mouth? And then revenue, how do they make money in a way that feeds that whole machine? And then, again, how do all of those pieces work together to move that Northstar metric? So you can't improve something you don't understand. So first thing is define the Northstar metric. Second, diagram how the business grows across these different touch points. Then the third question is, how much testing are they doing every month? Or probably every month is a good place to start. So how many tests per month are they running where they have a clear hypothesis? What is it they're trying to achieve with that test? Test has a very clear, it's either successful or it fails. And so how many tests per month are they running? And then what is the distribution of those tests? So are all of the tests in acquisition, or are those tests spread across each of those key levers that I talked about? And so the right company, or a company that's doing it well, is going to be running lots of tests across each of those key levers, is going to have a clear understanding of what their Northstar metric is, and then is effectively going to be growing that Northstar metric.
That's great. So the one that will listen this episode, you hear the question. Now get to your desk, take a pen, take a paper, and start answering these questions.
Yeah,
Sean.
And anyone who says that they come up to me at the How To Web and says they heard this and they can't tell me what their Northstar metric is, then I'm going to be very disappointed when we talk.
Sean, thank you again for joining my podcast. It was a wonderful talk, and I enjoyed it a lot. So
you're welcome, Robert, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, for people who want to connect with you, where they can find you, how they can connect with you.
Probably the best place is either on LinkedIn, where I'm just linkedin.com/in/Sean Ellis, or on Twitter @Sean Ellis. And on LinkedIn, I accept every invite that I get on LinkedIn, and then when they try to sell me something, I disconnect. So people can know.
So don't sell. So don't sell. Just connect.
Yeah, just connect and share ideas, and that's great when we engage with each other. But if you have some people who give you a sales pitch every day on there, and who has time to do that if you're connected with 5,000 people?
Oh yeah, I believe you. Okay, Sean, thank you again, and I hope we will see at the How to Web conference. And people, if you heard this podcast, please go to the How to Web conference, and I hope you know your Northstar metric.
Awesome. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of the answers to what we just went through, I'm running those same sets of questions on companies on my podcast, which is the Breakout Growth Podcast. And so they can get some good examples to come up with those answers from that podcast.
Awesome. I will link up your podcast to this to the blog post when we'll publish this episode.
Sounds perfect. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks,
See
Sean.
you in Bucharest.
See you. Bye.